Well, welcome to Christ and Culture. This is Pastor Jeff Short, your Bible teacher and cultural analyst. And today we've got a program talking about the famous Menendez trial that happened about 20 or 30 years ago out in California. Two brothers killed their father and mother in the living room with shotguns, blew their heads off, blew their bodies together apart with shotguns, and they are in prison right now out in California. And the reason why we're covering this episode with the Menendez brothers is because there's a move right now to free them and to set them free because of the circumstances that led up to the murders of their fathers and mothers, namely that they were sexually abused by their father. And so that's supposed to justify their release right now. And the district attorney in Los Angeles is now exploring possibility of releasing them or reviewing their case and releasing them after a review and so forth. And we're getting a lot of different voices from the Hollywood jet set scene. Kim Kardashian is one of the leading voices calling for their release after 30 years. And we have a Christian podcaster on the internet named Becket Cook, who is also advocating for their release. Now, what I want to show and demonstrate today is that they should not be released, and that those who are advocating for the release of these cold-blooded killers, these brothers, the Menendez brothers, who killed their parents in their own living room with shotguns, walked in and started shooting and emptying the whole chambers into their parents and leaving them in a puddle of blood in the living room. They should not be released. Why? Because they murdered their parents. And it really doesn't matter what the circumstances were before that mass murder, the two murdered at the same time. It doesn't really matter from a point of justice's standpoint because of the nature of this crime. It is murder. And the Bible says that the soul that kills someone should die. This is in Genesis. Genesis 9:6 talks about capital punishment, and that if you take someone's life, your life will be taken. Well, under biblical justice, the Menendez brothers would be dead right now. They would have been executed for the slaughter of their parents in their own home. Now, what is happening in Hollywood among the Hollywood celebrity set is that, again, we have someone like a Kim Kardashian taking up a cause, and based on emotion and feeling and a twisted sense of compassion and empathy, and they are going based solely on their feelings for these brothers and how they were treated so bad. And they were treated bad. There's no question about it. But we cannot get caught up in emotionalism. We cannot make decisions, especially in matters of law and order and justice, on the basis of mere empathy and compassion and sympathy for the people who are involved. We have to look at these things through a very objective standpoint, almost detached standpoint, and say, okay, what did they do and what is the penalty for what they did? And they actually got off quite a bit on this charge because in a real biblically informed, Christian worldview informed justice system, these two brothers would have received the capital punishment for their crimes, for killing their parents in cold blood. And so that's first-degree murder. So what I want to do is look at Becket Cook's analysis of this, because he takes a very sympathetic, empathetic, emotion-driven perspective on this, and he comes to the conclusion that the boys should be released. And I want to argue that this is not a sound, solid, biblical Christian worldview speaking. This is a empathy, sympathy, emotional, feeling-oriented view winning out. And this is not the way a Christian should process decisions in life. especially in matters of life and death. This is not how we as Christians are to operate. And so I want to say that Becket Cook has been caught up in the whirlwind around this case, and in California, especially with the celebrities like Kim Kardashian speaking, and he has allowed his emotions and his feelings and emotionalism to override his reason and his biblical thinking, his rational thinking about this subject, because he is advocating that they be released, and that is totally unwarranted. So let's hear what he says at first, and then I'll comment and jump in at the end and show why this is wrong.
Hey guys, welcome to the show. Today, I have a very unusual episode, but you'll understand why I'm talking about this when we get closer to the end. I was reading an article in the New York Times a couple weeks ago about the Menendez brothers. There's a new documentary about the whole story of the Menendez brothers and the trial. If you don't remember, Lyle and Eric Menendez were kids. They were 18 and I believe 22 when they shot their parents in their Beverly Hills mansion. Their parents are Jose and Kitty Menendez. And the trial...
And let that sink in, though. I mean, he skipped over that real quick. They shot their parents in their home, in their living room, on the couch. So they walked in and opened fire and murdered their parents in the living room. That's what they did. So you don't want to skip over that. You don't want to take that really lightly. He said it a little bit too light and fluffy. It's like, oh, they walked in and they killed their parents. Yeah, they killed their own parents. You got to let that sink in.
They were arrested in 1990, and then the trial began in 1993. By the way, if you have kids in the room, this is kind of mature content, so please, maybe don't let them watch this. But I wanted to watch the documentary because I wanted to see again, because I mean, I was around during the trial. I had just moved to Los Angeles, and it was because I moved to LA in, I think, June of 1993. So it was very much, the trial was very much, it was an international story, but it was very much kind of close to home. I actually lived in 1993 a mile away from their house in Beverly Hills. So I wanted to look back on it and remember what exactly happened, because I know that their defense was the idea that their father molested them pretty much for their entire lives. I mean, not Lyle, the older brother, was molested from the age of, I believe, 6 to 8 years old by his father. And then Eric Menendez was molested, I think, from 6 years old until they were killed, until they shot their parents, until he was 18.
Yeah. So they were definitely treated bad. They were definitely treated in an inhumane way. They were definitely sinned against by their father. They definitely deserve to have justice done in their case. But again, that does not justify what they did. Two wrongs do not make a right, as we all know. You cannot be offended by something or even the victim of something and then take the law into your own hands. And that's essentially what they did. Now, what he's also not mentioning is that these boys were not slaves. They were not held against their will to be in their home. In fact, the older brother was actually in college at Princeton University, clear across the country on the East Coast, and his father and mother in their home were living on the West Coast. And so he was away from them. He was not involved in any way with this molestation at that point. And so he had options as to how to go about getting justice for what his father had done to him and was still doing to his younger brother. So there were things that the older brother could have done, and there were things that the younger brother could have done, short of killing their parents in their own house. So again, this summary is somewhat lightly going over what they actually did, their crimes. But he's trying to show that, yes, indeed, they were offended, they were molested, which is a crime in itself, and this father should have been in jail and could have been in jail if these boys had done some different things.
By his father. And the molestation was so insane. Their father was a very powerful man in Hollywood. He was the CEO of Hertz Rent-A-Car for a while, and then he became the head of RCA Records. He had a lot of businesses. He was very influential, very powerful, very, very aggressive and dominant from what, witnesses have testified about him. And so I went back to look at their testimony, the kids' testimony, Lyle and Eric Menendez, to see how kind of it held up and just to remember it really. And I watched their testimonies and I was just absolutely blown away by the veracity of the testimonies. I mean, you can't, and I'm going to show you these clips of their testimony about the abuse.
Again, it's not a question of whether their testimony was not true. It probably was all true. I didn't watch this documentary, and Becket Cook is referring to a recent documentary that was shown that has really touched at the heartstrings of a lot of people, including this Becket Cook podcaster. It has touched at the heartstrings of Kim Kardashian and all kinds of Hollywood celebrities. And so, again, you have to be careful about watching a documentary and then getting caught up in the producer's message of that documentary, because they can leave things out, they can add things in, they can emphasize certain things and overemphasize other things. And so you have to be careful that you're not being manipulated emotionally and psychologically. In other words, it could have been a very heavy propaganda movie in favor of releasing these boys. But there's no question that they were offended and that they were molested and that they had a crime against them by their father. And their father should have, in the best world, should have been behind bars, should have been arrested, should have been convicted, and should have been sentenced for his awful, heinous crimes against his two boys. There's no question about that. But that's not the issue. The issue is whether these two boys were justified in killing both of their parents at the same time in their living room. Open fire, cold-blooded murder. That's the question. And whether they should pay for the crime of cold-blooded murder. And I would say they should. Just because these other testimonies were true and they were very emotional in their testimonies, I think that's what swayed a lot of these people, including Becket Cook, is the emotional nature of the testimonies, that they were molested. There's no question about that. That this was a crime against them by their father. But again, do they have the right to take the law into their own hands and administer vigilante justice? Do they have the right to be the judge, jury, and executioner of their own parents? Or should they have made a better decision, especially the older brother, of finding an investigator, finding someone in law enforcement, finding someone in justice to help him process his grievance? He had a grievance. He had a legitimate claim against his father. And shouldn't he have gone through different routes other than the direct route to cold-blooded murder of his parents? Yes, indeed, he should have.
And I'm sorry, but you cannot act this way. Like, you cannot act this. This is not acting. This is real. And I can tell because as you know, in my book, I talk about this. I was molested when I was 9 years old, and I'm not comparing my situation to theirs because thankfully my experience was only one time with a school friend's father. I spent the night at the house of my friend, and in the middle of the night, I woke up to his father molesting me. And it was it was the most terrifying night of my life. It still has ramifications and effects. It still impacts my life today. I still have, issues sleeping sometimes at night and other things. And it really does a number on you. When you're molested as a child, it does a major number on you. So the judge in this case was Stanley Weisberg, and he was Okay, so again, here we have another clue as to why this Becket Cook might be overly sensitive to the testimony of these brothers and be overly sympathetic to releasing them, even though they committed cold-blooded murder. He himself was molested as a boy, so he has that connection with these brothers, and he can still feel the pain of that molestation, which was that was a terrible crime that was committed against him, and it was a terrible crime, even worse crime, committed against these brothers by their father. But again, does that justify the sons committing cold-blooded murder of not just the father,
but the mother also. That's something that will come out in the trial. And that is that, okay, let's just give this as a given that the boys were justified in killing the father who molested them for all those many years. But what about the mother? The mother, it comes out, did know about the molestation and didn't do anything about it. But does she still get the death penalty because of something she knew about and didn't take action to stop? So the boys are basically saying, we're going to be the judge, jury, and executioner of our father. We're going to kill him for the crimes he committed against us of molestation. And we're also going to kill our mother. We're going to be the judge, jury, and executioner for her because she knew about it and didn't stop. Now, wait, is that justice? Is that really justice by killing the mother because she knew about it, but she didn't stop it? No. In any court of law, you will not be executed for something you knew, but you didn't prevent from continuing. So she might have gotten jail time. She might have been sentenced to a number of years in jail, but she wouldn't have been executed for knowing about an abuse and not stopping it. But the boys went ahead and executed her as well. So again, they should be in jail just for the murder of their mother, the cold-blooded, brutal murder of their mother alone. But we're also talking about the father itself. You don't have the right as citizens in a civilized society to go in and commit cold-blooded murder because you think that the actions of this person who abused you justified murder. No, you don't have the right to make that decision. There is such a thing as a justice system, and there are courts, and there are trials, and you have to go through the process. You cannot have your citizens just doing whatever they want to do in fulfillment of justice. If we're going to do that, we're going to go back to the Stone Age. We're going to do that, we're going to go back to the ancient times and blood feuds and all kinds of activities that happen without a criminal justice system. No, we have a justice system. We have to follow that rule. And you can't have citizens doing what these two boys did and then having them released. No, it doesn't make sense.
He was the judge in the Rodney King case. And this is important because the four officers in that case were acquitted. And so Stanley Weisberg was determined to win the Menendez case because he was so humiliated by the loss in the Rodney King case. And so
okay, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit here.
So that was the defense in the trial. And so the trial begins in 1993. And again, this is after not only the Rodney King verdict, but also after the O.J. Simpson.
So he's saying that there were politics involved. I don't see the big connection because...
So the DA in Los Angeles wanted to...
He's talking about there's internal politics in Los Angeles and that these boys were thrown in jail to be an example of people and yada, yada. I don't see that as relevant because they committed a crime and they don't deny that they committed the crime. So we're talking about, was their crime worth the sentence that they got? And definitely yes, cold-blooded murder.
They felt like their father was going to kill them if word got out. And so once Lyle confronted his father and the father freaked out, the kids went and bought guns. They ended up in San Diego buying 2 shotguns, 12-gauge shotguns. And oh, by the way, so one time when I think Eric was of it. And so, yeah, I mean, you can't look at that testimony and think he's acting. No actor can do that that well. Like that is crazy. And it also just, when you've had that shame and that guilt and that all of that trauma built up in your life for your entire life, that's what happens when you finally tell it, when you finally tell people about it. And
okay, he's describing again the testimony of these two brothers, and there's no question about it that they were highly emotional testimonies because they had a highly emotional, severe wound within them by their father molesting them, sexually molesting them. This is a heinous crime, and the father definitely should have been locked away, probably for life, for what he did to these boys. But again, you don't allow brothers to walk into the living room of their home and in cold blood murder their parents for whatever the reason. The only justification that they could have possibly is if the father and the mother had guns and they were coming to kill the boys, and the boys were able to grab some guns and shoot their parents as an act of direct self-defense. That's what the courts would recognize as self-defense. But it is not self-defense if you plot a murder, if you come in and then, when they're unsuspecting, kill them in cold blood. That is not self-defense. If you're going to count that as self-defense, then you throw all of the justice principles away in the court. No, the older brother, again, was entire country away on the East Coast, and his father was on the West Coast. If he had wanted to stay away, he could have just stayed on the East Coast. He did not have to come back. And he could have flown his brother out to the East Coast, and they could have gone about seeking justice out away from the parents. But again, they made a terrible, bad decision. They decided to take the law into their own hands, do something that you're not supposed to do. This is not a biblical way of settling justice, and they acted, and this is why they're in jail, and they should stay in jail. And they should be happy that they're alive, because under the biblical Christian view of justice, they would be dead right now for killing their parents. If you take someone's life, your life shall be taken. Genesis 9:6. That's the capital punishment principle in the Old Testament, and there's no evidence that it was ever revoked in the New Testament. So these boys should stay in jail.
At the end of the trial, the verdict came back, and it was both juries were hung juries. And I think all of the women in the juries wanted to vote for manslaughter, and all the men wanted to vote for first-degree murder, because the men didn't believe that boys could be molested by their father. And so it was both juries were hung. And the Judge Weisberg declared it a mistrial. And so then there was a second trial, and this time, again, the DA in Los Angeles was so determined to get these guys convicted, and the judge was so humiliated by the hung juries that he didn't allow almost all of the witnesses. They were in their first trial. There were 51 witnesses for the boys, basically corroborating that there was sexual abuse and that the father was abusive and all.
Okay, again, though, did they commit the crime or not? Whether there was abuse or not, they committed a crime. And it was not direct self-defense.
That is... So after the second trial, they were both convicted of murder, and they were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. And they have been in prison for, I believe it's 35 years now. So think about this. The first basically 20 years of their lives, 20 odd years of their lives, they were more or less in prison in their home in Beverly Hills by their tyrannical father and their just evil mother. They were in prison in their home growing up, and they've been in prison for 35 years now.
Yeah, because they killed their parents.
And they've never really felt freedom in their lives. Lyle went to Princeton after high school. He went to Princeton for a year or two before the murders. And so he had a little bit of freedom after college.
He had a lot of freedom. He was halfway across the globe. And so again, there's an excuse being made for these boys when they had, at many opportunities, the means to make better decisions, wiser decisions, and they chose this brutal murder decision.
High school, but Eric never experienced that freedom. And now they're both in prison for life. And
yes, because they murdered their parents. Again, the point is being missed here by Becket Cook and a lot of the celebrities in Hollywood who are just crying for their release right now. You can't get around the fact that they killed their parents. Do we want citizens, boys, girls, children, killing your parents because you think you have a right to that murder? No, you can't run a civilized society on that basis. And Becket Cook should know that. He is a Christian convert from Hollywood, the Hollywood scene. He lived a very wicked lifestyle out there, as many of the Hollywood celebrities do, and he converted to Christianity. But I'm afraid in this instance, he is allowing his emotionalism. And this is what happens a lot in the Christian experience. They allow their emotions to get the better of them, And this happened with a lot of Christians in respect to the elections of 2024 with Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. There were Christians, very loud voices in Christianity, saying that you should never vote for Trump and that they would be voting for Harris, totally contradicting the biblical Christian worldview on key moral, cultural issues like abortion, LGBTQ, transgenderism, gay marriage, all these things that the Democrats were pushing, and they somehow justified in their minds making these emotional decisions against Trump to vote for the evil Democratic Party that is committed to killing babies in the womb. Again, the same thing is happening here with Becket Cook. He is allowing his emotions to run wild. He's not thinking through the issues. The simple fact is these boys murdered their parents. It was not a direct self-defense situation. They walked into the home and killed not just their father, who had molested them, who was a scumbag, no doubt, but they killed their mother. And she wasn't completely innocent because she knew about the crimes of abuse and didn't do anything. But still, she didn't deserve to die. I don't know of anyone who says, yeah, if you know about something bad and you don't tell anyone, that deserves death. No. So she didn't deserve death. So just on the basis of her death alone, they should stay in prison, and they should have even been executed, capital punishment. But California has illegalized that.
What's interesting is a lot of, and then also this is another, so all these things have come out now about this, and one of the Menudo brothers, his name is Roy Rosselló. He was in the popular boy band Menudo, which was very big, I think, in the late 80s, I believe. And Jose Menendez was the head of the record company. And Roy Rosselló just recently came out and claimed that he was abused by Jose Menendez when he was 14.
It doesn't matter.
And his claims were strikingly similar to the claims of both Lyle and Eric Menendez, the claims they made about their father's abuse.
It's irrelevant.
So that was a big turning point in their case. So now the DA in Los Angeles, George Gascon, has come out and said, we're going to look into this case again and basically, see if they should be released.
And Gaston is a liberal leftist, and he is in with the Hollywood celebrity set. And yes, that makes sense.
And also, this is crazy too. Rosie O'Donnell and Kim Kardashian both have been in contact with the boys, and they believe the boys' story. They believe the boys should be let out of prison. I do as well.
Okay, so why are you pointing to Kim Kardashian as a solid testimony of why they should be let out? And why would her opinion count for anything? Does she have any credibility to speak on these matters other than she's a celebrity? And celebrity is someone who is famous for being famous. Why should her voice sway anyone? Even with her bad track record of pleading for these causes of people on death row that probably 100% of the time deserve to be on death row. So this is emotional thinking. This is overly sympathetic, overly empathetic thinking. And as Christians, we actually have to do better than this. We actually have to get to the root of the matter, and this is what judges do. And the ideal judge is a rational, calm, objective, looks at the evidence, and then makes a decision based on principles of justice. This is not what Becket Cook is doing, and Kim Kardashian. They're not doing this. They're letting their emotions and their empathy and their sympathy for the Menendez brothers and how they're in prison, and they've been there for 30 years, and oh, that's terrible. It isn't terrible based upon what they did. They walked into the living room of their home and killed their father and mother in cold blood with shotguns. So we need to think through these as Christians, and don't be fooled and don't get caught up in the sympathy and the empathy. And we will talk to you next week on another program. God bless.